The non-negotiable base of how I work is what I call my daily sketch. And I make one sketch and I write a minimum of one sentence every single day. There's no excuses for anything. I mean, be it migraines or bad days or travel or long days or parties, whatever. I mean, it has to get done. I had a really bad period mentally back in probably late 2015. And I just got to the point where, I was kind of weighed down in this perfectionistic streak that I couldn't really write and I couldn't really make art at all. So to kind of try and break out of that, I started the daily drawing on New Year's Day of 2016, and I haven't missed a day since then. And so we're in year 5 right now. And so I took these pictures on a New Year's Eve, this past New Year's Eve. And so I've actually added another notebook into this pile since I've taken this picture. But I post the drawing every day to an Instagram page, and I have one that's dedicated just to these daily sketches, and that's called Write Draw Daily. And these are my non-negotiables. Like I said, I made a deal with myself back in 2015 that if I was going to call myself a writer and an artist, I had to make art every single day, and I have. These pictures are just a handful of what I've posted since the beginning of the year, and some of them are absolutely atrocious, and some of them, I just hate them, but I don't pull them down. I spend maybe 15 or 20 minutes max on these, and really they're not supposed to be fine art, and they're not supposed to have any pressure on them of being finished or pretty. They're just there to keep my pen on the paper and the words coming out. And I have a daily reminder alarm set on my phone so that I don't forget to post. And I don't really work ahead. I don't stockpile drawings, and and if I know if I'm going to be busy, I'll do them much earlier in the day or work around my schedule. I was pretty superstitious, for a long time about missing them, because I felt like they really helped me kind of clear out of a lot of blocks. And and instead of kind of getting overwhelmed by the big stories and the pieces that wanted to come out, I could break them down and work on them, one feeling or one sentence or, one drawing at a time. And then those could come into something, much larger later on. And like I said, I don't miss these. I've actually, kind of dragged myself out of bed at 11:45 whenever I realized that I, was, almost getting ready to miss one, or, like I said, I've done them super early in the day. Take my notebooks with me if I'm going to travel. It's just a priority. And then aside from the daily sketches, another tactic that I have used forever is what's called the Pomodoro method. And that's where I set a timer for 20 minutes and I sit down and I work on a task, solely that task for 20 minutes without stopping. And then I'll stop and take a 5-minute break. And then I'll start the timer again and do another 20 minutes and kind of rinse and repeat, and that's really helpful, whenever I'm having trouble starting or I'm procrastinating or, whatever. I can usually talk myself into at least one of these, 20-minute stints. And then once I get started, then it's pretty easy to keep going, and I can usually end up doing probably 3 or 4. And I respond pretty well, to ticking things off lists and collecting little gold stars. So it really helps me kind of gauge how much work I'm putting in on a particular project. One thing that I also do now is I also set weekly goals in addition to the daily goals. So usually on Sundays, I try to post a piece of new work, like again, such as one of these illustrated stories or illustrated poems. And again, it kind of depends on how much time I've got during that particular week. And so in January of this year, I decided to set a goal that I was going to commit to making a new illustrated story every single week of that month. And there ended up being 5 Sundays in that month. So I ended up posting, five stories. So really kind of what I'm doing is I'm just kind of increasing the size of the bite of the art that I'm taking off and making, and I'm making plans to, to meet that goal. I had a stockpile of these little stories written and ready to go. And so I kind of just, sat down and mapped out which ones I wanted to draw. And then And then I just did a minimum of like 1 or 2 pages a day to meet that goal. And so I could work far enough ahead of time and to kind of be flexible if needed. I do dedicate 1 night a week to writing, solely to writing. And that usually happens through the writing workshop Kansas City, which is hosted by poet Jen Harris online. And poet Jen Harris is also an Artist Inc. alumni, and we're very good friends. And that workshop has been really fantastic in getting me outside of my comfort zones and you know, again, exploring writing, and we're writing in 10-minute chunks, so it kind of fits right into my process. So for me, it's kind of, you know, it's not so much about being able to complete these massive books and stories, but it's, you know, again, breaking off smaller and smaller bits that fit into what I can do on any particular day. You know, and some days that means that, you know, I'm only meeting the non-negotiable daily draws, and you know, and that was the case for most of last fall. Kind of from around October to December, you know, it was pretty rough for me, and I really didn't get hardly anything done. You know, I think kind of between the pandemic and the election, there was no extra space to really be creative. But then again, you know, it also means that sometimes I can turn around and get bigger bites done, and that's what happened in January, whenever I was able to finish at least, you know, 5 of those stories. And then, you know, I was able to turn around in January and do, like, you know, a chunk of these illustrated poems, which you see here. So it really kind of cycles and expands, and it just kind of depends on where I'm at and what I can meet. So that's really that's really how I work, and it's what works well for me, and might work well for somebody else as well. But so that's really the main portion of really what I had. And so here's, you know, again, all my contact information, and you know, I've got my daily sketch page up there, and then my own, you know, my studio page. And so that's kind of what I wanted to share. And I think I'd like to open it up and have a conversation and see, you know, what you guys would like to talk about, if anything.
I have a question, Sandy.
Sure.
I noticed that you have a lot of inclusion of trees, leaves.
Yes.
What's your tie to those?
I draw them all of the time. And for me, being in nature is very meditative, and that's usually where I find the biggest peace and the biggest solace. And a lot of the stories that I have, I'm going to kind of flip back and kind of go through some of them, but a lot of the stories that I have revolve around, you know, forests, and revolve around, you know, hearing things like the memories of the trees. Like this piece, this is actually a recent one, and I had just watched the movie The Dig, which is on Netflix, which is about the where they unearthed the Sutton Hoo burial in England. And it was a telling of that. And so this was kind of, you know, briefly inspired by that. And it's about hearing, you know, the trees that hold memories in what comes out. So there is 90% of the time there's going to be some sort of a tree or nature element in what I'm drawing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
On the slide after this one, can you go back to that?
This one? Or the
No,
one
the
before?
other one, I guess.
This one?
I was looking for the one that had, there were several horizontal pieces on the same page. Oh, wow.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I cannot read what's going on there. Could you
Yeah.
read us one of those or something?
Absolutely. So this project I did 2 years ago, and actually it goes back much further than that. The story, a different version of this story was actually published in Kansas City Voices Volume 15. And so and then I was in the Illustration Academy in the summer of 2019, and I ended up illustrating that story, and that's what this is. And so the assignment was, you know, use historical reference photos, and I ended up using photos that were taken by the French photographer Broussais. which was, basically about Paris at night. So the story is there's this, the first panel is there's this, old woman who's, talking about there's this chocolatier in Paris who, has this almost magical cafe, and it's like the best chocolatier in Paris. And so this guy is wandering through Paris at night. And so he ends up finding his way to this chocolatier, and he goes inside, and there's this lady there, and she starts plying him with chocolates, and there's all sorts of like beautiful, silver dusted chocolates and everything. And he's just, getting drunker, and she's just feeding him chocolates. And then all of a sudden, it turns out, she leans in and she's got fangs and she's the vampire. And what she has been doing is she's been like flavoring him and spicing him up like a chicken. And so he's got the right flavor. It really is what it boils down to. I had watched too much Food Network before I had written this. And so yeah, I was like, she's probably just getting him just how she wants. So.
What was the Kansas City Voices? That's not part of the UMKC stuff, is it?
No, so Kansas City Voices is a nonprofit, independent circulation here in town, and they were going pretty strong up until about 2019, and they were trying to focus on local authors, but they were open to everybody, and so they were doing like a yearly publication, like an actual print publication. And there were quite a few well-known people involved in it. I think Jose Faust was involved in it at one point. It used to be housed at the writing center off of Valentine, kind of behind the theater up there in that castle-y kind of theater back up there. And then they had a kind of a board turnover, and they've kind of struggled since then. But I think that they've just now released another volume. So they try to focus on local art, but again, it's not exclusively Kansas City.
Did they used to have, they still have art in it too, besides the voices, right?
Yeah, they do have art in it. So it's art and writing. And I was on the board for about a year, and then I had to pull out of it just due to other obligations. So yeah, so art and writing. They've also got a Kansas City Voices Youth. So there's a youth journal that is published also independently. And that's, again, we're partnering pretty closely with the Woodneath Library for that with some of their youth writing programs.
I have some old issues of that, because I think I was in at least one, and I think my husband was, with his poetry.
Yep. No, it was around for a long time, and it's still around. I think that they ended up, I think there was a year skipped or something, but
I've kind of forgotten about him. I'll have to dig mine out and look at it.
Yep. Like I said, I'm pretty sure they're still around. So.
I do a sketchbook, something every day too, except I'm not as dedicated as you. Some days I have to put 2 days on one page.
Yeah,
I get distracted, and I have trouble, and especially during all of this, getting inspiration. I mean, I've drawn about everything in my house, and
I look at Pinterest. So I just pull up Pinterest and I just start scrolling, and I usually will find things that I feel are interesting. And sometimes, it's like I need to work on something, like, it's like, hey, I need to work on figure drawing, or I'm really terrible at hands. Let's practice hands. And there's 20 drawings of hands, and
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm the same way.
I actually steal some off of Facebook. I take a photo of it, and then I kind of do my own interpretation of it. But it's just to give me something, to give me a little inspiration.
Yeah, I think I've drawn all the Greek statues that I can find pictures of, and flowers, and I mean, it's just, everything.
And I tried to make mine into a kind of a diary of this past year, what it was like to be so isolated.
Yeah, I've hit over 1,000 drawings. I think I'm actually probably closing in on 1,500 drawings, just of those daily sketches, just the number of days. But you know, I recently bought an iPad, so some of my daily sketches are now going digital. We'll see how that goes.
When you say going digital, are you photographing yeah, are you taking the picture or are you using a stylus?
I'm using the stylus.
Okay.
I've got the Apple Pen, and I did the Procreate app, so I can treat it like a normal sketchbook and a normal pen, and it's, to me, it feels a lot different than trying to use like Photoshop or Illustrator or something like that. It
Mhm.
feels pretty natural, and it's, like I said, it's been a pretty easy learning curve, honestly, with Procreate. So I was surprised.
What do you use for your blacks? Because you have a lot of black in some of those.
And some of these pictures, I use acrylic ink. I use this FW acrylic ink. I'll use that for some of it, and then some of the other blacks, I'll use the PH Martin's Black Star. This is India ink, and that's a matte Black Star.
Do you use a dip pen then?
It depends on what I'm trying to cover. I will definitely use a dip pen for smaller things, and then I'll just dip a brush in for larger pieces. And then for like some of these, like down there on the bottom where I'm doing some of the Greek masks, I just took a dip pen into that India ink. And then I've always found if I can wash my brush out pretty quickly, then the India ink, it doesn't really impact the brush too much. But if you let it dry, then you gotta use that pen cleaner on it and get it out, because otherwise it's like shellac and it'll like clog up your brush. So yeah, I use both. I have a variety of blacks, I'll kind of buy it in bulk. I can't, I've got some acrylic blacks, but usually I find it easier just to grab the inks. That's usually where I'm at.
Sometimes I use a black Tombow pen.
Yep. And some of these, I have some black Copic markers, like some of these I'll use just like my gray tone Copic markers, and I've got a black Copic, but I usually run that one down, so I'm usually having to stop and go get the ink. So these I ended up just these I just did with this is with the India ink, the matte black, the Black Star.
Does that bleed through? On the paper?
Usually not if I'm doing a heavyweight paper. So these were kind of some heavyweight Bristol board. I also I work a lot on illustration board, because I really like being able to pick up what I'm working on, and I like having it not buckle. So I do work a lot on illustration board, and the illustration board is usually like a hot press, so that I have like a smooth surface on it, and then I can take a pen to it if I want to do that. So it doesn't usually bleed through unless I'm on a pretty thin paper. Now if I'm just on the sketchbook, like those are just the recycled paper sketchbooks, it usually doesn't bleed through, but it buckles pretty good.
Right.
So usually I have to let it dry, and then I'll have to like smash it down or clamp it down.
Well, I do watercolor, and I'm having struggle with some of the sketchbooks I get, because if it has a real slick surface, it's hard to come back in and darken places. So
Yep. And I sometimes, if I know that I want to like dig into like watercolor for a while, like I'll just flip over and pick up a mixed media sketchbook.
well, there's different mixed media too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, some of them you can paint on one side, but the other side's slick and you can't. So
no. So yeah, usually I'm just doing pen and ink for the daily drawings, and I'll add marker in, like the Copic marker. But if I know I want to do watercolor, which, well, these were kind of inky watercolors, but these were all done on Bristol board. And then I've also, watercolor pads and things like that. So.
Are you familiar with Bob Holloway?
Mm-mm.
Since he's a Kansas City artist, he used to do, I think he was started the Plaza Art Fair. He was one of
Nice.
the originals. And he does wonderful journals.
Oh yeah. No, and like I said, I don't, mine are definitely not for show. I mean, they're really just to, keep my head out of, moving forward.
Do you want to say anything about some of your other work? I was just trying to remember some of the things in your credentials about your design work and awards that you've won for different designs and things.
Sure. I can go pull that up. If you guys want to take a look at it, let me stop this and let me do that. So my background, what I first started in was theater. And I was a set designer. So let me do this. Let me reshare here. So, so for what I was doing in theater is I was designing sets. And so for a long time, set design is, it's like, you're half architect and half artist. And so, I'm really the one who was figuring out what was gonna, how this was gonna fit on the stage and how it was gonna move and what pieces and parts needed to be there. And so that's really what I did for a very long time. I went to a lot of theaters around the country and worked, and this was a show that I did at Southern Illinois University at Carbondale, and it was In the Blood by Susan Laurie Parks. And the point of that, or the overall story of that show is that there's this woman who's kind of, been abused by the systems that were supposed to help her, and she ends up living in the street with her kids. And so this is kind of a dramatic telling of that. And so this is kind of a a stylized street and hovel and things like that. And so this was actually like a little children's show that I did down in Seaside, Florida. We were using the community park stage, and so this all had to be able to go on right before the show and then come down when the show was done. And so it had to rep out every time that we did the show, because it just couldn't stay there. And then let's kind of flip through some of these. This was again kind of that In the Blood show. This was actually done at the University Theater at the University of Kansas. And this is the department head at that time. Her name was Michelle Leon. She actually is a Moliere scholar, and she retranslated a couple of Moliere works and put them together into one piece. And so she did this original production of these two retranslated Moliere scripts. And so this set is kind of a very stylized version of something that kind of would have happened in Versailles, for them performing for the king. So this show was different because I didn't have really any crew to help me with this. Like they had some people who were like, yeah, we have some painters, and then they ended up not having the painters available that they were going to paint. So I ended up painting all of this myself. I had to pull some overnights on this. But a lot of this, I mean, a lot of this is just, we've cut down foam. A lot of this molding is just all foam that we've pieced together, and I did all the trompe l'oeil on the gold and on the proscenium arch up here as well. And then here's a different. the director had a very specific, blocking pattern, and she really wanted these stairs. She was super excited about these stairs. So this show was actually my thesis show at Southern Illinois University at Carbondale, and it's called The Mystery of Irma Vep. And it is a Penny Dreadful farce. And so really what it is it was originally written by this playwright named Charles Ludlam, who was a founding member of the Ridiculous Theater Company in New York in the early 80s. And so really what he was doing is that he was just taking all of these like well-known books and shows and just, using them as a structure to create his own little farcical play. So this very much was kind of like a riff on Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca. So it's about this this man who unwittingly marries a vampire, and there's also a werewolf running around, and they end up going to Egypt. But anyway, so it's supposed to be this very gothic, farce. And so the thing about this set is that it's on multiple tilts. So the floor tilts at a 12-degree angle. So the floor was raked. And then all of these walls also leaned in about another 16 degrees. So you were sitting in the audience, the whole thing looked like it was kind of like coming forward towards you. And the director wanted to, this is them in Egypt. And again, the whole thing is I very much made it two-dimensional, because one of Charles Ludlam's, he was very well known for performing in drag, and he made this really, well-known comment that, that it wasn't about him being in drag, it was about the illusion, and he would make you believe the illusion, and you would fall in love with it no matter what, right? And so for you to see past the illusion. And so I very much went with the kind of this very flat two-dimensional set, very much playing up on the fact that, we're very aware that this is an illusion and this is a set, but you know what, you're going to like this show anyway, and you're going to fall in love with it. So this is kind of the bigger piece of it. And again, everything's forced perspective, and they rode in on the Sphinx paws, like they rode them in like, horses and camels. And this is actually, the Charles Ludlam's face. And so this is a bigger picture of the set. And the curtain that you see, the red curtain, that's actually all flat. We painted that to look like drapery. So it's all flat. The walls are all flat, but again, they're all leaning in. So again, we're really playing up on the fact that this is not what it is, but you're not going to care anyway. Let me go back. So this set, I don't know if I have a picture of it on here, but this set, the director actually wanted a very dramatic scene change before the set moved over to Egypt. And the set actually in the middle actually cracked apart, like we designed it to crack in half. And we set up, a ton of lights underneath it so that the light shot up like this, like this giant, dramatic explosion. And then the whole set rolled back, and then the Egypt set came down in front of it. So it very much had to move. There was, the two actors had to have, the two actors played 6 characters. And so they were doing like 6-second costume changes. So the whole set had to be designed around, can these people, can these guys go off stage and have space to do their changes? And so there was a ton of like technical issues that we had to kind of account for in that. This was a show. This was up at Missouri Western. So my undergraduate work, I have a degree in theater from Missouri Western, and this was a show that we did up in the black box space up there, and this is Death Trap, which is a show. There's actually a movie with Christopher Reeve, I think, and Michael Caine, but it's about these guys in the script in this movie, and they end up killing each other over this movie script. And anyway, so it's set up in this remote village, and so all of the rock that you see there is we just took foam board that house insulation foam board, and you take a blowtorch to it and you carve rocks out of it, and we glued those on the set and painted them. And we had wood paneling, and and so theater very much is, how do you be an artist, and also I think a scavenger as well. And let me pull up. So in addition to being kind of a designer, I also was a professional scenic artist for quite a few years. So a scenic artist is where you take the designs that a designer is going to give you and you replicate them exactly. And so I was a professional artist for the Utah Shakespearean Festival, which I did props for them. And then I was also a scenic artist for the Alabama Shakespeare Festival. And so this I actually carved. I carved this by myself just because of how work schedules lined out. So you can see the chariot lift in the corner for scale. This actually, I think, was like 16 feet tall. It was 18 by 12 or something like that. It was very large. And I only had a very specific amount of time to do it, just again, because of all of the stuff that needed to get built on the set. And so I ended up carving a lot of this, mostly with an X-Acto knife that kind of, expanded out so that I could bend it a little bit. And I used wood rasps and, just whatever I could lay my hands on to kind of get that carved. And then we coated it with like foam coat so that, actors running into it wouldn't tear it up, because that's always a huge problem. And then this is it on stage. So this is actually a production of Coriolanus at the Alabama Shakespeare Festival. And then this also went along with it. This was like a medallion. I think this medallion was probably maybe 2 feet across, 2 feet in diameter. And that's all foam board, house foam. This was a mural that me and a professor did at the McKanda Community Center. This is actually the town's first doctor. So McKanda, Illinois is just south of Carbondale. It's like a small little town there in the by the National Forest. And this was the trompe l'oeil painting that I did of all of the metal work on that set. So that's all flat. That's just 2-dimensional. This was a drop. So this is a 40-foot drop that was painted for Alabama Shakespeare Festival. This was for the Taming of the Shrew. It was set in Tuscany. Then this show, I did all of this scrim work here. This the red wall behind is looks like a wallpaper, but it's actually a scrim. And so a scrim, whenever you light it from the front, is opaque, but whenever you light it from the back, it becomes transparent. So you can't paint it with normal paints. You have to use like very thin washes and dyes, and you basically have to use a Hudson sprayer on it. This is a rock that I had to carve for another show. This is actually just all bead foam. They wanted a very specific rock and a very specific look in with very specific places to set feet. So I carved that out of bead foam, and then we covered it in epoxy resin, so that it would hold up. It actually held up past the show. I had it on my front porch for a while whenever I lived in Alabama. This is a translucent drop. So this was muslin. So I painted this on muslin, and then again, whenever you light it from the back, it becomes vaguely transparent. So so properties is really where you're building everything that an actor touches. So this is it can be painting based, but it can also be very carpentry and welding based. And this is for Utah Shakespearean Festival, and so the Servant of Two Masters is basically this farce about these twins that get their identities mixed up. And so they wanted these trick trunks, and they wanted these trunks to be able to have this the special effect of having a handle lift up like modern luggage and rolled around like modern luggage, like it was supposed to be a sight gag. So I ended up welding these 3 trunks from scratch. So we welded them from scratch, built in these handles, because the actors also had to get inside of them. They also had to stand on top of them. They had to like basically they, I mean, we had to have them so that they could withstand everything. So they were all metal, and then we finished them and made them all, look identical as much as we could. I built these lances for Man of La Mancha. This was all metal and pop rivets and leather work on these lances. This was for a production of King Lear at Carbondale, and this was a very, very high concept design that I was just doing props on that show, but so we went out and collected, thousands of pieces of grapevine and willow vine and used that to make this throne. So that's his actual throne. I made a warhammer in a props class, so that's learning how to weld and carve things down and make handles, and so I've got that. And then we also made large puppets. This is a backpack puppet. This was a class project, and so inside of this thing, inside the Mad Hatter, there's actually one of my friends from graduate school is in there, and he's got a giant backpack on, and there's this whole bamboo rig underneath that backpack puppet. And so we marched it in the parade, like there was a little parade in Carbondale, and we marched it. And so my friend Anna and I were holding the hands, and my friend Jeremy was in the middle. So I got familiar with puppetry, so theater, you're doing tons and tons of stuff. This is, molding and casting. So I molded there on the left, I made an acanthus mold out of clay, and then, made a mold and then cast it and smooth on. And so, yeah, so tons of stuff in theater. And it's this really, like I said, it's this really weird mix of art and being crafty and figuring out how to, work with no budget. And yeah, definitely taught me how to think outside of the box.
That no budget thing, that's the clue.
At Missouri Western, we would actually go dumpster diving. Like my professor was an expert dumpster diver. And so we would just go around to all of these departments that would throw things out. And so we ended up with speakers from the astronomy department because they were throwing out some speakers, and, we would end up with wood and stuff from, other areas. And so, yeah, I mean, we would just go scavenge and figure out what we could find. So I'm pretty good at it.
So you never know where your art can take you.
And absolutely not. I mean, like I said, theater made me very, very good at, thinking outside of the box, and, how can I work with what I've got? And if I can't work with what I've got, how can I adjust and move forward? So yeah, it was very, very much a life skill that I've used in a lot of different areas outside of art and theater. So yeah.
So what do you enjoy the most? The sketching, drawing, or writing, or just both equal?
It's both equal. Right now, within the last 5 years, I've really learned how to put art and writing together to make these stories. For a long time, they were separate. For a long time, I was just being a writer, or I was just being an artist, and learning to put them together. I'm not so much of a comic artist as I feel like I'm just, a visual storyteller. Like I don't really have the style of, DC and Marvel comics, and I don't really want that style, but definitely I feel like, putting these stories together and telling them in a visual form is something that I enjoy. Now, I mean, with theater, I was telling other people's stories forever, and it's like, well, I think I'm ready to tell my own, and that's where I'm at.
Right.
Yeah.
We appreciate you taking time to present all this and get it all ready. Our friends from Nebraska joined late. Levon, are you on mute, or can you? Levon? She may be on mute. They didn't check in until after the main presentation, I think we were already doing Q&A when they joined us. I was going to see if she had any questions she wanted to ask, but any last thoughts or questions while you've got her?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes,
Thank
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
What was that?
That was a child, but thank
Oh.
you. And it's a lot of encouragement for me as I'm raising 6 children and trying to get some art done while I'm doing that, and trying to support my husband while he supports the family. So it's encouraging, and I've done something a little bit similar, that I started a streak in January where I'm trying to do at least one thing a day, that one recognizable sketch a day. So
There are days where it's just like, I really don't want to do this sketch, but I'm like, I don't want to break my streak either. So
You've got
Right.
quite a streak going.
can't break it now. So,
Thank you, Gary, for recommending Sandy.
Oh, sure.
yeah, no, it was great.
Everyone have a good rest of the evening, and I hope to see some of you Saturday when we can hang some pictures. Thank you. I'm
Thank
going
you.
to end this. Good night.
Right, thanks.
All right.
Sandy, I've got a bam. Oh, she left.
Sorry.